I'll show you how to find points on a line when you're given the slope and only one point. And I'll show you this algebraically. So let's start with the example. You have a slope, so m equals 3. You have 1 point, which is at 2, -5. You have another point that is at 4, but you don't know the y value. All right, and we're going to try to find the y value algebraically. So, if you recall, linear equations can be written in slope-intercept form, and that is the form y equals mx plus c, or y equals mx plus b. M stands for your slope, the steepness of the line, and c stands for your y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis. We know that the slope is 3, it's a positive slope. We know that one of the points on the line is at 2, -5. We know another point is at 4. We don't know what the y value is for that point. So there is an equation we can use, and this is to find the slope of a linear equation or a linear graph. And this is take the two y values, so the y value of each of the points, and subtract them. Find the difference or the distance between the y values. Find the distance between the x values, so take the two x values of 2 points on the line, subtract those two x values, and that will tell you the distance between the x values. So this is essentially the rise, the horizontal difference between the 2 points, and this is the run, the vertical difference or distance between the 2 points. And you may have heard rise over run when referring to the slope, and that's the rise over the run, so the difference in the horizontal distance over the distance or the difference in the vertical distance. So we're going to use this equation and this formula to help us find the second y value. So I'm going to substitute in place of m, I'm going to substitute the slope, which is 3. In place of y2 and y1, x2 and x1, I'm going to substitute my x and y values. So let's call this x1 and this y1. We'll call this x2 and this y2. So we're trying to find the value of y2. All right, so in place of y2, I'm going to put y. In place of y1, I'm going to put -5. In place of x2, I'm going to put 4. And in place of x1, I'm going to put 2. I'm going to simplify a bit. So this is still 3. When you subtract a negative, that just means plus a positive. And 4 minus 2 is 2. So now I have a linear equation, and I need to solve this equation for the variable y. So first thing, I need to get rid of the division of 2, so I'm going to do the opposite, which is multiplying both sides by 2. I get 6 on the left side, and when I take 2 and I multiply it by this divided by 2, they cancel each other out, so I just have y plus 5, the numerator. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides to get y by itself. 6 minus 5 is 1, and this is just y. So y equals 1, so that means my y2 value, to have a point that lies on this line with a slope of 3, would be the 0.41. So I have found the value of 1 to make this true. I'll show you that with another example. So let's say our slope is -2/3. We have 1 point, which is at -1, -7. We have a second point, which will say we don't know the x value, and the y value will say that is 2. All right, same idea. Use your slope formula. In place of m, I'm going to put -2/3. So again, let me remind you, we're using this slope formula right here. To find the slope of a line, you take the rise over the run. So the change in the y's over the change in the x's. So slope equals, let's call this x1, y1, x2, y2. It doesn't matter if these are the x2's, y2's, and these are the x1, y1's, as long as the x1 and the y1 are together. They're the same point, and then the x2, the y2 are together. All right, so slope equals y2. So that's 2 minus y1 is negative 7 over x2, which is our unknown value, minus x1, negative 1. I'm going to simplify. I'm going to leave this still as negative 2/3. 2 minus a negative 7 is 9. And x minus a negative 1, we can just write that as x plus 1. All right, one method I could use to solve this, if you've heard of cross multiplication, you can multiply this entire fraction by 3, and you can multiply this entire fraction by x plus 1, and that will get rid of your denominators. So I'm going to use the method of cross multiplication, where I multiply the numbers that are across from each other to get rid of the fractions. So I'm going to take negative 2 and I'm going to multiply it by x plus 1. So that means negative 2 times x and negative 2 times positive 1. I'm going to do the same over here. I'm going to take 3 and I'm going to multiply it by 9 and I get 27. So I have negative 2x plus a negative 2 equals 27. Solve this equation for x. So the opposite of adding negative 2 would be adding a positive 2. So negative 2x equals 29. The opposite of multiplying by negative 2 would be dividing by negative 2. And this is x. 29 divided by negative 2. We can just leave that as a fraction, or we could write it as a mixed number, or we could write it as a decimal. I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. And it is in its simplest form for an improper fraction, so we can leave it as is. So that means that the x2 value, to make this point fit on this line with this slope, would have to be at the point 29 over negative 2 for your x, and your y value was 2 for that point. So this is how you solve using the slope and a point to find points that are on a linear equation.